We're beginning the current Daf Mesechta Nedarim Daf Yomi. Begin on the top line of the Yomid. The Gemara is in the middle of a discussion, the previous Daf, discussing this question that was brought up on the Nedarim Daf, which was that if question is, are Geduli Heter Malnes Ikar or not? Do we say that growths that come out of something forbidden, would that make it bottle or not? Now, what's important is the part that we're up to right now is that originally we had quoted an opinion in the name of Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg answered the question. He says, I'll quote you teaching Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai spoke about onion of truma that was planted and you had more growths over the ikr, and he says it's mutter. So you see according to Rabbi Yanai that you say that gedulam would be matter eser issa. Then the Gemara asked, Rabbi Shloimy says, what do you mean? Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Yomi, both of them saying that it's not going to be mala eser ikr. So the Gemara got into a whole discussion saying, well, could I prove it, could I not prove it? But ultimately, the Gemara had brought a raya, seemingly, that you see that the Gedulam Amata de Isser, it brought a halacha from Shemitah. So the Gemara answered, that's not difficult to be able to. Why not? Because that's something that the Isser was on the Karka, Shad Yishvias. Shemitah is different. Because the Isser came through Karka, so B'tilas and Amika of the Karka. And so therefore, where the Gemara ended off with was that Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Yomi agree that there are going to be cases that the heter is mavatul, the geduma is mavatul, the ikr. But that's specifically when the isra de karka, then the heter is going to be the karka. But let's say stuff like maisa, which was the Gemara's last question, said no, maisa is not the isra de karka, maisa is digun, the making it the part of the kukaram. That's what's causing it. And therefore those things, the ikr is not going to become batul from the heter. Rabbi Yanai, and this is important to keep in mind because that's where the Gemara is going to start off where we're up to right now. Yanai says no, everything is going to be the hetem of the ikr, even if it's not something that the isra de karka. That's where our Gemara is up to at this point. I should go to my cousin in Cheskel, turning to Daf Yomi, appreciate my joining with today's Daf. Be Il Nishma for Shmuel ben Yosef, Yisrael. Somebody is discussing today's Daf are Geduli Heter, like we're saying these are the theme of the previous Daf. Do we say the growths of Heter Amal Nasa Isser is going to elevate and nullify the Isser or not? Which one of the things that come up in today's Daf is Davishish Matirin, that if it's something that could be permitted, so then we don't say bittul, but the question that's going to come up is, let's say Nadarim will consider Davishish Matirin because there's a mitzvah to be matter in that. But other things, even if you could be matter, like Truma, we might not consider that as Davishish Matirin because there's no inherent mitzvah to do that, although you technically could, which obviously comes into the whole question of could we say bittul or not. Another thing that comes up is actually interesting, the bittul the other way. Let's say you have something that was mutter, and then the outgrowths are aser, would you say that the isser is going to be mavatul, the heter, to say that now this becomes batla and becomes aser, which the Gemara is going to say heter sheben heichen halach. If it was already permitted, you already took over like the trumas and ma'aseh. How does it go back to being tabel? Where does the heter go to make it now that it should become aser? And finally, the Gemara is going to say that even if you're going to say that the het is mavatul the ikr, maybe shani heichen the kotar, maybe that's only where you put in the effort. You went, you planted it, and therefore you mavatul it. But if let's say it happened by itself because it rained and this and that, maybe then we wouldn't say that it's going to create a bit. So beginning our Daf New Testament Aleph, the Gemara was citing several brises to resolve the question: Geduli heter, are they malnas isser aloi? Would you say that asa gedul mavatul ikr, or maybe lo asa gedul umavatul as ikr? So Masiv, this is the top line of Daf New Test. Masiv Rama Bachama, he asks from the halacha of our Mishnah. Now, the Gemara's question is specifically on Rabbi Yanai, who had said in the beginning of this discussion of Menzayin on the days, his case that he was talking about was a bitzal, an onion of truma. Now, onion is something that ain't zarikala. Its seed does not disintegrate. The bulb always remains there. And you had Rabbi Gedul of Alikarai. You have now that the growths are more than the original root. So he said, even though this was a truma onion, it's going to be mutter. Obviously we see that he holds that all types of gedulim, this is the main point that the Gemara is asking at right now, even things that the isser is not a karka. Truma is not an isser that comes through karka, like we said for meiser. And still we see that it's going to be malnas ekar. That's why we're going to ask from koinamos, which is the Gemara's question, which is our Mishnah, which is our Masechta of Nadarim, that we see that ein malin, that you cannot be mala, you cannot nullify the gedulim on the heter. Now, based on that of Rabbi Yanai's principle, you should always say that the het is mavatul eseikar. Now, the Ran just asked, he said, why don't we ask from the Braisa that we already quoted in the previous daf of a litra of meiser of tevel, which we said that that's something that the digun is mechayiv. It's not something that the isser's through the karka, and yet we learned before in the Braisa that we're not going to say bittel. So either the Ran says because we'd rather ask from our Mishnah, which is always stronger than the Braisa, or that no, from Meiser of Tevel, which was, we said that the Levi didn't take off, he had a Meiser and a Meiser. That's obvious that we're not going to say bittel because it's Davish Shish Levatirin, because it's something that has pidyon from elsewhere, and therefore, because you said you couldn't use it in Minei Ubei, you have to redeem it from somewhere else, so therefore that's considered Davish Shish Levatirin, so of course it's not going to be bittel. So therefore, just the Ran says that's why we didn't ask from this. But we're going to ask now from our Mishnah on Rabbi Yanai, where Rabbi Yanai says you always say Gidul Mevatel as a Iker. We're going to ask from our Mishnah. What do we say in our Mishnah? Our Mishnah said, if someone says Koinim, I'm taking a neder, pay this ha'elu alai, that these produce are forbidden on me. So he said, or let's say it's the Koinim hein alpi, they're forbidden on my mouth, or Koinim hein lifi, they're a neder to my mouth, whichever wording he said. But we said Asa bechel lefeinu b'gidulei. We said that it's going to be forbidden in whatever you transfer it to and whatever the outgrowths are. Now, let's say he says, Shani Eichel B'Shani Time. He adds on the words, what I'm going to eat or what I'm going to taste. And then we said, Mutter B'Chilufein B'Gidulein. Because, again, as the Rambam explained there in the Mishnah, you're not really tasting that item or eating it if it was transferred or if it was an outgrowth. Okay, but the Mishnah had qualified and said, this is all talking about B'Dav Shazari Kol, if the seed disintegrates. So then whatever the outgrowth of that is not the original item. It said the Mishnah, but something that the seed does not disintegrate, which is like an onion. That's very important because that's the case of Rabbi Yanai of Betzal. An onion doesn't disintegrate; it just adds more layers to its onion. Said the Mishnah. Then even the outgrowths of the outgrowth, let's say you take that bulb and then you plant it, and you take again, and you plant. It's going to be aser. Wait a second. According to Rabbi Yanai, he said that even an onion, even by something that ain't zari kala, he said that if you took an onion of truma and you planted it, if the gidulim were more than the ikeh, it's going to be meraklet. You see clearly from our Mishnah, I like that. You see, by something that davar ain't zari kala, it's going to be aser. You're not going to say it's going to be meraklet, the primary neder that you had made on that bulb of that onion. So it seems to contradict Rabbi Yanai. So on that, Rabbi Abba says, no. Shadi koinomis, Nedarim are different. Why? Since by a neder, if you wanted to, you could go to the Rav and you could ask about it and tell him that I don't want to be able to, I didn't mean to, I don't want to do this neder. So that makes a neder a kainim, which is the halach of our Mishnah, like something that has a permitted way of having it. Don't ask on me, Rabbi Yanai says, that I always say that the gedulim will be ma'ale se'ikah. Like I say, even the onion of truma that you will say bittel from the halach of our Mishnah. They say you're not saying bittel. Even gedulim are going to be aser. Obviously, the growth of that is way more than the original kainim you took on that onion. No, because the onion is a little bit elevate bottle of kainim, because that's davish matirin. Because you can go to the Rav and you can say, hey, I don't want it, and he'll be matrid for you. So you don't say bittel. That's why it's going to be also even by gedulim. That doesn't contradict Rabbi Yanai. And then the Gemara says, what do you mean? What's the case of Rabbi Yanai? But a truma, his case, which we quoted on 2 daf ago in the Menzayim base, was talking about a truma onion that you plant, and he said if the growths are more than the ikka, it'll be mavatl. But truma is also something to buy mitzvah. If you want to go to the Rav and say some type of opening or regret, like any other neder, you could also ask an undo truma. And even so, ubatli b'roiv. You're telling me that, you could ask it, you could be shoyl on it, das hastenish bittel. You can't have bittel because it's davish matirim. You have a permitted way. So why should we go on batla? It's not true. Truma, you could also be shoyl, and yet still we say bittel b'roiv. Where do we find this? None. We're in the Mishnah Masechet is trumas. Now, the Ram just asks, he says, why doesn't the Gemara ask, if that's the case, by an onion of truma also, why does Rabbi Yanai say that he could do like mevatlet? What do you mean? If he wants to, he could be shoyl, and then this davish matir. Why doesn't the Gemara ask directly on him? So on that says the Ram, because no, the Gemara could reject it and say that Rabbi Yanai's case was talking about a Yisrael they're inherited from his maternal grandfather, which means his mother's father who was a kohen, where he cannot be shayl on that anymore because it's already been truma that was given to the kohen, which you can't undo that anymore. And therefore we ask from the Mishnah, which that you can't reject like that, as we're going to see in this Mishnah. Because the Gemara is asking, why don't you just ask directly on this halacha? But the Gemara is asking from a Mishnah, not on Rabbi Yanai, but on the Mishnah. Then you tell me, oh yeah, if you can be shayl, then there's no bittul. The Mishnah says in Truma is following halacha. Sa Truma Tameya. If you have a sa of Truma that's Tameh, now why are we picking dafka that's Tameh? Truma itself is what we need to do bittul on sometimes. No, they're saying a chiddush of the diak that we're always saying if there's not 100, then it's going to be wrong. But if there's 100, which is the ratio that you need to have a bittul of Truma, even though it's Tameh, which is a double like whammy, it's still going to be mavatl because it'll have the ratio. But okay, be that as it may. Yeah, you have a saw of Truma that's Tameh. Shenafla lepachas memeachum. This cupful, let's say, of Truma falls into the hole. They're making the dough for the donuts on Chanukah, and it falls into all these chulin, less than 100 of that saw. So then Terakiv you have to let it rot, because since the Truma is tamei, so it's not fit for even the kohen to eat. You can't even burn it because we're concerned that it's going to cause takala, because like the Gemara says in Pesachim Navchav Beis, it's going to hang around, people might eat it. So there's no bittul because less than 100 to 1 of chulin to Truma. So therefore Terakiv. Says the Gemara, okay, but halameya. But if let's say it fell into 100 of chulin to the 1 saw of Truma, then Tala it's going to be batal. Wait a second, batal with Truma? I mean, Truma is considered Davar Shesh Matirin. You don't say bit on Davar Shesh Matirin. Why is it Davar Shesh Matirin? Because you could be shayl on it. Didn't you just tell me that the reason why our Mishnah is not a contradiction with Rabbi Yanai, even though he holds Gidul Mazmal as Ikka, because we don't talk about Davar Shesh Matirin.
How can you be shayl on the Truma? I don't understand.
You say charati. You say I didn't mean to. I didn't know. Whatever. It's like anything that with your speech is like halacha of a neder. So you just told me that would make it that there's no bittul because of Davar Shesh Matirin. So how can you say bittul over here for would have a ratio of 100 to 1? Shouldn't be battling in 1,000. So how many they said no? We're talking about the truma biyad kohen askin. We're talking about where the truma is already by the kohen. Oh, once the kohen's already zoich in it, then the limotzi mitchell, you can't go and undo something that already was qualified already as truma. It already was given to the kohen. So that's why it's going to be batal, because you cannot be shoyim. It's not Davar Shesh Matirin. The Gemara says, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. If that's the case, Ima Seifa, look at the Seifa of that Mishnah in Trumas. The Mishnah says, Im Hoysa Tahayra. So we were talking about Saw of Truma that's Tameh. If it was Tahar, then even though there's no Bittul, let's say I have 98 of Chulin to the 1 of Truma, so no problem, sell it to the Kain. The Kain can eat it, a Yisrael cannot eat it because it's a mixture, sell it to the Kain. Wait a second, what's selling to the Kain? You're telling me this is by a Kain already, and that's why you can't be shy but say sell it to the Kain. No selling, it's just he has to eat it like with Kedusha and Truma. So Allah says, no, we're talking about Yisrael, Shenafaloi Mebeis Avi Imay Kain Askina. The Einikel inherited from the Zayda. The Zayda gave him Chanukah. He came to the Zayda, the Kain. He said, "Oh, Tzadikel here." He gave him this, the Chanukah donut that was made with the trimmer. He gave it to the Einikel, and then that fell into all the other donuts. And now it's all doesn't have 100 to 1. So then we're saying sell it to a Kain. So the reason why you're selling it, you have to, in other words, you can't say bittul anymore because shon given by the kohen. You can't be shayil only unless it wasn't given yet. It was already given. So it was given, so why are you selling it? No, because the Zayd the kohen gave it to the Einikal Yisrael. And he gave it to him, and he said, here, and then it got mixed in. So then you have to sell it. That's how it resolves both those points. The Gemara says, no, it still doesn't work out. Because Vakatani Seifa, the Seifa of that halacha says, Timocha l'koyin. So sell that whole mixture of, let's say, 90 chulin to 1 sub truma to a koyin. Chut midmei oisasan. Except you cannot charge the koyin for that 1 sub truma that's mixed in. If it was from the Zayda koyin, why can't you sell even that sub? If you would tell me that it wasn't yet given to the koyin and it got mixed in, so you can start koyin, you could sell it, but can't charge the koyin for that sub that's coming a kumten. It's his, not yours. You could decide which coin to give it to, but you can't charge a coin. But if you're telling me that it came from the Zayda coin who already got this, so why can't you charge for it? It's like a regular coin's truma. He could charge, he could sell his truma. So why wouldn't you have to charge for that one saw of truma if you tell me that he inherited it from his Zayda? Right? In other words, the chulin is yours. Is the truma yours? If you didn't give it to the kohen yet, so that you can't charge for it because it's you have to give it to the kohen. You can't charge him for truma. Truma has to be given to the kohen. But if you got it from your Zayda who got it from some Yisrael who gave it to him and now got mixed into all the other stuff, you could charge for that truma. It's yours. The kohen owns that. So why can't you charge for that sub truma? So Ella Ema rather, so the Gemara gives a whole different approach now. It says a different pshat. The Gemara says, Bishloy Mekaynamis, I mean, you're asking me a question. I give you an answer for Rabbi Yana, and I said, no. Our mission is different, because it's talking about Nedarim.
Isn't the question to look at the coin that if you tell me it's by a coin, then he doesn't need to sell it at all?
Originally we asked, exactly, if it's by coin, there's no selling. So we said it's not by the coin. The coin, the Zayda gave it to the Einikel, Zantochtes Zakin, who was a Yisrael, he gave it to him.
He's really not allowed to, right?
Why not?
His grandson Yisrael could eat truma.
No, he's not going to eat it, but whatever it is, he's going to give it to whoever his friend in class or whatever that's kohen. But now that got mixed into his chulin. And now, what are you going to do? There's no bittel, so you got to sell it to a kohen. That's why you're saying selling it. And now, so now the Gemara is taking a different approach. The Gemara says, again, I had answered you for Rabbi Yanai that, oh yeah, Rabbi Yanai says bittul on everything. The Gedulim will always be mevatel iker, but not by our Mishnah. I'm just talking about the Nedarim. The Nedarim have the Varim Sheish L'Matim. You can be matud, and therefore there's no bittul. Then we asked, so why is Truma different? So the Gemara is going to tell you why Truma is different. Because they'll say like this, I understand by Neder, mitzvah l'tshul. There's a mitzvah to be shayil. And if that's the case, like the words of the Ran are, it's like as if you were already shayil. So it's in other words, it's like it's already a davar shel heter, which you can't say bittul. Why? Shum Rav Nosson, because Rav Nosson's halach. What does Rav Nosson say? He says, Kol hanaydu, whoever takes a neder, kilo bana bama. It's like as if you built a private altar when it's forbidden to. And if you fulfill your neder, kilo makro, that's as if you were marker on it. So therefore, that's a mitzvah to be shayil. We don't want you to keep your neder. Whereas truma, my mitzvah chulela. What type of mitzvah is it to be shayil on the truma? There's no mitzvah to shayil on truma. Therefore, since the heter is not coming automatically, and there's no mitzvah to do it, says the Ran, that's not considered a davar shesh matir, which is interesting. I mean, you could be matir it. Still, that's not called davar shesh matir, even though you could kri charois from the truma. And therefore, since it's not davar shesh matir, so therefore, of course, we're going to say halacha a bittul. Because it's a davar asa. Truma is asa tizar. And the Ran just points out, hektish that was mentioned on the previous daf, in the items of davar shesh matirin, hektish, why would you say that's davar shesh matirin? You're saying it's a mitzvah. So it says the Ran, it's talking about hektish about the kabayas, which you always have to redeem. Because a regular carbon is no mitzvah to redeem it. Not a mitzvah, it could be, maybe. But, so therefore, again, the Gemara resolved for Rabbi Yanai that kainamis is specifically there that it's not going to be mal, it's not going to be bittul, because there you could say it's a davar shesh matir. Whereas truma is not considered davar shesh matir. So that resolves Rabbi Yanai. Now the Gemara goes back, Gufa. The Gemara goes back to what we mentioned, a teaching from Rabbi Yitzchak on Daf Nudzayin Mabeis in the name of Amr Rabbi Yechna. Yechna said the following halacha, and we're going to elaborate on it. We brought this in originally to ask and said, oh really? Is that true that you bring from Rabbi Yanai that a gidul mavat leikar? We have Rabbi Yechna. So Rabbi Yitzchak's teaching, name Rabbi Yechna was Litra B'Tzalim, that actually had two teachings of Rabbi Yechna, and actually the second teaching was this one of Rabbi Yechna. Actually, was not the original Rabbi Yechna. I mean, there's two. There's Rabbi Yechna. Rabbi Yechna says that it's not Mavat, and then we actually brought Rabbi Yechna that actually seemed to say that it is, and we said no, maybe l'chumr shani. We said that no, maybe it's only as a stringency. We'll say that the Gidul Mavat Leika, not necessarily as a leniency, and this was that teaching, but. Being that as an A, Omer Rabbi Yechon, it says litra b'tzalim shetikna. If you have a litra, which is a certain amount of onions, that was fixed, meaning that you separated all its maisras. Now vizada, and then you go and you plant it. So we said misaseres lefi kula. Now when you're taking off maisra, that's why we said that even though it sounds like that you're saying a bittul, we had said that maybe it's only as a stringency, which this is a stringency, this halacha. what do we say? Now when this thing was replanted and it comes out, you have to take ma'aser not only according to the growths that came out, but even you have to take ma'aser from everything. Meaning even from the original onion that was already fixed, you have to take ma'aser from that also, because the gedulim come along and the mevatel the ikr totally, and now you have to take ma'aser from that too, because the new growths are tevel. So even the original thing that was not tevel anymore, you have to go and take ma'aser from that too. Okay. Now Yosef Rabba become Lashmaita. Rabba was sitting and saying this teaching. Rav Chizda said to Rabba, Man so yislach le'richin Rabba. Who's going to listen to you and to your teacher Rabbi Yechanan? What do you mean? Heter shebehen lehechan halach. Where exactly did this permissibility go? In other words, Duran says what he thinks the question is that even if you're going to say that gedulin of heter could be mevatel the ikr, the roots of iser, there the reason is because since you have more gedulim than the ikr, comes out when you're eating the item, you're not tasting a taste of iser at all. And therefore, even though there's iser that's mixed inside of it, and it didn't go anywhere, it's still there, it's going to be permitted because you're not tasting the iser. That's how bittul works. But by meiser, since according to the calculation of tevel, is what the Torah obligates you meiser, so I don't understand, says Rav Chizda. How do you tell me you take meiser according to the whole thing, but the heter shebehen, where'd it go? How could you take meiser on the original bulb of the onion that already had meiser taken off from it already? In other words, how are you comparing it to the halach of the bittul, which is, I don't taste it. So I don't taste it, okay, even though the iser is there, you'll say it's permitted. But what do I do with meiser when it goes according to a cheshbon of according to how much there is over here? A tenth of what? Why would I take a tenth of the original bulb? So that's the question of Rav Chizda. So Amalei, so Rabbi said to him, what do you mean? What's such a modern nazach? Milo Tzanadikava say, didn't we learn the Mishnah Masechet Shvius that we quoted already before that seems to say like Rabbi Yechanan? What does the Mishnah say? It says, B'tzalim sheyardu aleim gesham. Let's say you have onions. That it rained on those onions in a Shemitah year. But these were onions from before Shemitah year. And now it's raining on it in the Shemitah year. But Simcha, now the sprouting, says the Ketintam Beis, says the Mishnah, if the leaves were black, asurin, then they're going to be forbidden. Now, why are they going to be forbidden? Because that seems to show that it had a lot of growth now in the Shemitah year. Now, the one thing is, the fact that it says unspecific asurin, says the Ran, it sounds like that it's asur according to the whole onion, according to how Shemitah produce is, even the original bulb. But if the leaves are yellow, are greenish, okay, then we turn them permitted. That means that they didn't have, the growth didn't come from the ground, it came just from the onion itself, and therefore it wouldn't be problematic. Okay, but what's Rabbi saying? If it's like you, Rav Chizda, that you're asking, what do you mean? Heter shebehen leichen halach. Wie is gegangen in the heter, that it was heter over here? Says Rabbi, v'chish chayrin, so I don't understand the Mishnah. If it's shvat, if it's black, am I asurin? Why is the whole thing asur? Meaning you shouldn't have said unspecific and just said asur. Lema, you should say heter shebehen leichen halach. Where does the heter bit go? Meaning because you shouldn't say that the value of the original bulb is like the Shemitah itself, because if you swap this item for a heter item, according to your opinion, it shouldn't, the monetary value should not take effect of the original bulb. But says Rabbah, obviously you see that the gedulim, the growth that happened to it in the Shemitah year, is totally mevatel the ikr, as if it wasn't there, because even the ikr itself changes through the growth and becomes a davar shel iser. Says Rabbah, what do you mean? So you're getting zalacha in this Mishnah. Amaloi, so Chizah says to Rabbah, no. Mi sabrit, do you think that al ikr ketani? When this Mishnah said asurin, that this onion that got black leaves in the Shemitah year, that it's going on even the root? No, atesefes ketani asurin. It's on the addition that it's saying is asur. Now, as Rabbi Shloimy explained, the ikr is going to be asur also, but it's only going to be because of the tarobis with the tesefes. But what's really the isser is only the tesefes is not the ikr, because no, says Rav Chizda, you cannot say a heter disappeared. If it was heter, I'd still disagree with Rabbi Yechanan's teaching. Don't bring me right from this mission, because what it's saying is asur is not the ikr, it's only the tesefes. So the Gemara says, wait a second, Yahachi, if that's the case, then my asur Shimon Lil Meimer. That Shimon Lil, in explanation of this Mishnah, he says like his own teaching as if like he's saying something different, but based on what you're saying, he's saying the same thing. The Brisa. Shimon Lemi says, Hagodol b'chiyav, that which grew in the time which obligates you, meaning in the Shemitah year, well then chai. Then you have to do beer, it has the halach of Shemitah produce. Hagodol b'potter, that which grew when it's potter, meaning the ikr, the bulb which grew in the 6th year, potter, that's potter. But based on you, Tanakama Nami Hachiyama, the Tanakama says the same thing. You were saying in the Tanakama that Asurin is not the whole thing, is only the gross that happened in the Shemitah year. So Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg is the same thing. So says Rav Chazal, yes, Kula must need Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, Ketanila. The whole Mishnah was all Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, and therefore there's no disagreement. Therefore Rabbi Chazal still stands strong in saying that I disagree with you. It's only the Tesefes, but the Ikir, I can't say something that was mutter is suddenly not here anymore and becomes bottled in the Issa. Now, Ran explains the next part of the Gemara now is Rabbah saying, okay, although I cannot support Rabbi Yechanan from this Mishnah, as you're pointing out, but it's not difficult to me. Why not? What does Rabbah want to say over here? It says, Ad Kamli Shamalei Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Up until this point, what do we find in Rabbi Shimon Gamliel? Meaning, although over here we're saying that the Gedulim are not mavat the Ikr totally, so that would seem to be a difficulty on Rabbah, right? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who Rav Chizda is saying is the Tana of the Mishnah, but whether you say that or not, Lamaisu Rabbi Shimon Gamliel in the Brisa, who's saying that no, only what was Gadol B'chiv is going to be Chayav. What grew in the Shemitah year, what Gadol B'Pata is going to be Mutter. What do you mean? According to Rabbah, why are you saying that? Rabbi Yechanan's halacha should say that the Isser is Mevatel the Heter, and even the Heter should become Asa. So Rabbah has to defend now. He's on the defensive now. First he thought he'd bring a raya against Rabbi Chizda to prove Rabbi Yechanan's halacha. Now he's on the defense. You see Rabbi Shlomo not like that. You see that what was Gadol B'Ptur is going to be Pater, and not like Rabbi Yechanan's halacha that that even the het is going to be bottled. So he says no, it's not difficult because that's only the loikot torach. Here where it just rained on the onion in the Shemitah year, the guy didn't put in the effort to try to be mavatel the heter. So therefore, says Rabbah, I'll agree that yes, you're not going to say the gidul will be mavatel the ikir of the heter. But where a guy put in the effort, like the case that we're discussing, of a litra b'tzalm which was planted in the ground, then says Rabbah, batel beruba. Then there will be batel in the rive, meaning the gedulim will come along and totally be mavatel the ikir, and even be mahapach the heter into is. Now, the Ran says, don't ask on me, the Ran, on what I wrote in the beginning of the sugya of Nedarim Daf. This is very important because this is what the tumulsach the machlekes Rishonim. We had already mentioned that the Ran says not like the Rosh and Taisus. The Ran had said that we hold like this, and this is how he explained the whole question from the beginning of Nedarim Daf. He said that if we hold that the gedulim are not like the ikr, meaning it's independent from the ikr, even though it's coming out from it, it's considered its own thing, so it'll be considered geduli heter. So then said the Ran, we knew for sure that means it would be mavatlet. That's how the Ran explained the question. The question he said was really the same thing. This question of gedulim mata as ikr was all about, are the gedulim themselves mutter? Then if they are, they'll be mavatel. And if not, then not. Meaning if it's not mavatel, that means it's a trust itself. Unlike the other Rishonim, Tais and Rush, that they say no, we know the gedulim are mutter. The question is going to be mal in this ikr or not. But says the Ran, wait a second, I seem to be contradicted from over here. Previously he brought a raya from a sugi like him, not like the other Rishonim. He was asking himself. He says he was saying like, what's Rav Shimon Gamliel's halacha? We're saying hagadol b'chiyuv chayiv, what grew in the Shemitah year, it's going to be chayiv. Obviously we're saying that the gedul is not like the ikr. Even though the ikr is a 6th-year onion, which is mutter. We can say what grew from the rain in the 70s is going to be aser. And even so we're saying, hagadol b'pater pater. What do you mean? We see that even though the gedul is not the same as the ikr, it's not b'mavatlet. But according to the Ran, haynu hach. It's the same thing. If you say that the gedulim are a different status, let's say of heter or of isser, whichever one, it'll be mavatel the ikr. But here you're seeing that no, even though it's different, it's not doing bittul. So he says, I'll tell you why. Here the reason is because you cannot be mavatel heter. Isser is normal to have bittul, but not heter. That's why. Meaning our whole question, our premise that we said that if it's something that's going to be mutter the gedulim, then it's mevatel the ikr. That's from isser b'mevatel. That's from heter b'mevatel isser. But for isser to mevatel heter, to make the heter as if it's not mutter, that we don't find. Moreover, he says, is because in this case, the guy did not put in the effort to be Matal the Iker. The Gedulim came by themselves. And therefore, says the Ram, the truth is that previously, when we wanted to resolve the question from the case of an onion, which the root was from the 7th year, from an onion that was planted in the vineyard and then you uprooted the vineyard, we could have rejected it. We could have said that the onion is different that was planted in the vineyard because you didn't put in any effort. So to make a bittul, you just left it there. You took out the vineyard had disappeared. So therefore, that's what's not going to be valid. He says you're right. It's just because that rejection would not have worked for the other case that we had brought from the young tree, which you actually did put in the tircha to go and plant it in the old tree. So therefore, that's why even by the other case of the onion that was planted in the vineyard, we also didn't reject like that. But you're right, we could have rejected like that too. So he just addresses this question that it seems to contradict his premise. He says not. And one of the main principles he's saying is because that's only from heter being matal isser. That's what generally we say bittul is nullified the isser, but from isser being matal heter, that we didn't necessarily say that's the same thing. But Al Kapanim says the Gemara that this halacha, B'Shim Galil says, Rab, it's not difficult on me and Rabbi Yechanan, because I will only say that you could do mevatel the iker when you put in the tircha to do that. When you didn't, then you're right. Maybe the isser will not be mevatel the heter. Says the Gemara. So okay, b'chol heicha b'kotorach. Are you telling me that whenever you put in a tircha batel beruba, then it's going to be batel in the majority because then you put in the effort? What do you do with the case we had previously brought? When you have a litra of meiser that was tavel, meaning that you have meisim and a meiser, the Levi had meiser that he didn't take of meiser yet. With the kotarach, where we said that he went and he planted it. That's he's putting the effort in the ikr in the planting, and even so, but what we learn over there that it said the oisa litra. We said okay. We said what grew after that has its own halacha. We said, but that original litra, which was tevel, because it was meiser rishon without taking trumas meiser from it, we said ma'asulav mimokam acher lefi cheshbon, because he said the rest was in the shemitah, so that you didn't have to take off meiser. But that original that had the iser, you have to take meiser from somewhere else according to the calculation. Wait a second. So we see that even though you put in the effort, the iser inside of it is not batal. Because if it would be batal, then why are you saying ma'asur now? You should be mevatel that litra regarding all the growths that grew in the shemitah year. So you see now, like your principle, you're saying whenever you put in the tircha, it's going to be batal. Says the Gemara, shani gabe meiser. Meiser is different because the Amakar the Pasuk says in the bottom, asa ta asa v'gomer. Taifing you should surely taif as called tvua zarecha, all the tvua of zarecha. So what do you see from there? What you see from there is the Torah is saying that even zaracha, even your zera that you planted, what does it mean? If you already had grain that was already fixed, and you go back and you plant it, you have to go and take a meiser again, because the ikr becomes batal regarding the growth, like Rabbi Yechanan halacha that will say that the gidul mevatel the ikr even of iser being mevatel heter. Now, from the fact that it says zarecha, it sounds like that specifically seed that was mutter already, because that's normally what people do. It's like you have already your grain, you have your whole crop, and you take over your trumas and meises, and then from the extra seeds you go and you plant it. As the Gemara says, by what's mutter people usually plant, meaning that's what we're saying that the gidul mevatel the ikr. But what's aser, meaning if you never had fixed that grain, that's not zaracha. Why not? Because people don't usually plant what's prohibited. So therefore, from zaracha it sounds like that by iser, meaning like our case of when the meiser rishon was tevel because he did not take up trumas meiser, that the gedul will not come along the mevatel the ikr. It's a little bit of a few steps, but you see Rabbi Yechanan's halacha because it says zarecha that you can actually plant zarecha, which means because people usually plant only that which is mutter, we're saying that you can have to take off meiser again from zarecha, which had already taken off meiser, because the gedul of iser, because new growths are tevel, are mevatel the ikr, which already had been already fixed. So that's actually Rabbi Yechanan's halacha. Now, but the inference is also that it's only gedulim of heter that you're planting, but of iser, then we're not going to say this halacha, which that actually tells us regarding meiser that actually you're not going to say bittul of heter over isser, only isser over heter. Because that's what Zedech is telling you. Only that which is mutter is what you're planting, but that of isser will not have this halacha. So ironically, even though you're putting in the tircha, and usually you'll usually say more bittul of heter over isser than isser over heter, here you're not going to say that the heter is mevatel the isser. Which the Ran says, I find this very difficult, he says, because our whole discussion is in stuff like onions, meaning stuff that in zara color, where the seed does not disintegrate. That was our whole discussion. Now, biblically, there's nothing that the seed does not disintegrate that would be biblically chayav meiser. It's only daga and tirish b'yitzah. Those are not things that the seed doesn't disintegrate. And if that's the case, hay be medayik from zarecha, that gedulin that does not have the seed disintegrate will not mevatel the ikr of iser. Biblically, regarding meiser, you don't even have such a case. So how can zarecha be telling you? Says the Ran that appears to me that you're right. The pasuk is only on a smachta ba'alma. And really, there's a reasoning behind it. It's not really a biblical decree. It's not a Gidei Sakasa. That the law would dictate that you could be Mavatal Heter, that people plant, regarding the growths of Isser. Why? Because ultimately, when you have a seed of Heter, and now it grows as Tevel, like any seed that you have to take of Meiser, those growths need to have Meiser take from it. You have a Taregus of Heter and Isser in this growth. So they're not the same. When you have things that are not the same, we say laws of bittul. Now, bittul is where the majority wins. So the majority of isser will win over the minority of heter. But when you have isser be'isser, when they're both usser, for example, let's say when you have a litra of meiser that's tevel, which we said because the meiser did not have meiser taken from that meiser, which is trumas meiser. When you have growths which are also usser, either because shmita, for the Isra of Shemitah, or any other years of a Shemitah cycle because of Tevel, that doesn't make sense that you're going to say a law of Bittul, even though the Yisrum are not the same, but like I said, it's Isra be'Isr, and things that are more similar, you cannot say that one of them is going to battle the other one, like this says the Ran, I said on Daf Yomi. He says that's how it appears to me. But he says, but still in Daitinech, he says, I'm still not okay with this, and Mitzorchan Ilas Rav says, I need to make a Rav, I need to have a good teacher for this to figure this out, but Lamaisa, that's what he's trying to answer and saying that it depends. If it's heter and isser, then you could say bittul. If it's isser and isser, can't say bittul, and therefore that's why it's going to be different. Even though, in other words, it's only on a smachta, but there's a reasoning for this because Lamaisa there's heter and isser versus when it's just isser and isser. Now the Gemara goes to the last teaching, Gufa. We had said up in Zayin Mabeis that Amr B'Chanina Tirsa Amr B'Yanai. Another teaching we had quoted was that of Rabbi Yanai, that says B'tzal Shal Truma Shenaktav. You have an onion truma that was planted, and this was the original teaching when the question was asked regarding if you could have Gidula Mates Isser. We had quoted this teaching of Rabbi Yanai, who we just discussed in the beginning of our daf today. That we asked a question from him. The teaching went, you would take an onion of truma that was planted, but now the growths are more than the ikar. What is going to be permitted because you have bittul of the heter versus the isser of truma. Says Yomel, remembers that to say the gedula is continued with samach menal heter, that the growths of heter are malnas isser, which that's the whole halacha we've been mentioning on these dafim. Is that really true? But there's now in Mishnah this trumas that says gedula truma, the growths of truma are truma. So obviously you see that the growths that come from the bulb is the same as the bulb itself. So how can it be mevatel when it's truma itself? So says the Gemara, when did Rabbi Yanai say an onion truma? It wasn't that the onion itself is truma. Rather, begeduli gedulin kamrina. We're talking about the growth of the growth. Meaning, we took the growth of an onion of truma now had its own growth. Oh, so then therefore that's geduli gedulin. That's very far away from the original truma. That's going to be permitted, and that's going to nullify the gedulin. Because the geduli gedulin will mevatel the gedulin. Says Gemara, that's what I need Rabbi Yanai for? Hanamitinina. That was also taught over there. The Mishnah says geduli gedulin is chulin. The growth of the growths are chulin. In other words, that's not truma. The Ran says it is tevel, but why would I need this halacha of Reb Chanina, of Rabbi Yanai for if that's already explicit? Says the Gemara, no. What Reb Chanina's teaching is a filabadavish in zarakah. Even if it's something that the seed does not disintegrate like an onion, even that, if it's already by geduli gedulin, it will be mevatel the gedulin. Says the Gemara, but what's not in the Mishnah says that says hatevel. If you have tevel, untyped produce that already had the obligation of meiser, for example, it's already smoothed out in the pile, you're not allowed to eat from it even as a snack. If you go and you plant that tevel, so the Mishnah says gidula mutar. The growths are going to be permitted, meaning that you can at least eat a snack from it, as long as it was not established yet for meiser. But davish is our color. If it's something that the seed disintegrates, but davish is our color, but the seed does not disintegrate. Gidulin are asur, not forbidden to eat from it even in the snack, even before you smooth them out in the pile, because that tevel that had been originally smoothed out, that's mixed into it in the growth, is going to be asur. All the more so if you have gidulin of truma, which is itself a asur thing, in something that the sleeve does not disintegrate, which is the case of an onion of Reb Chanina, it should be asur. So how can you say this can be mutter if you're talking about an onion, which you said is the chiddush of Rabbi Yanai? So the Gemara says that ribuya de rabu gidul alikarei mutter. That's kamash malan. That's what he's teaching. Which the Ran and Bam and Tesman base his girsa is hasam over there in the Mishnah says this true is the le rabu gidul alikarei. When you don't have more of the growth of the root. Hacha de rabu gidul alikarei. Here we come on where they have more growth than the root. In other words, says the Ran. When do we say by tevel that the gedula are also that we're asking from this Mishnah says this trumas on Rabbi Yanai? That's talking about when you don't have more gedulin than the ikr was, which that ikr is the gedulin. Over here, very simple answer. But over here, by the onion of truma, we're talking about where, for example, the gedulin are more than the gedulin, and therefore you'll have halacha bittul. I mean, no one's going to disagree that you'll say bittul. It's just that Mishnah is saying the reason why the gedulin are aser is just you don't have a majority. We're just saying it extends even to the growth. But if you have a majority, then you would say halacha of bittul even by davish and zara kala, and that's the chiddush of Rabbi Yanai's halacha. Hanalacha nodrim in the yerg, which I'll return to the 7th paragraph and says dharma hanodrim in the yerg, which spoke about again primarily like the previous paragraph when you take a vow from something, what's included in that, in the definition, and what in the inclusionary chaluf in the gedulin, and thank you then for hosting us.